Hello everyone, I'm the person who made the page. Okay, so we have a Michael Jordan fan who wants to go on. He's from YouTube. He goes by the YouTube username of Lord Amin. He has Michael Jordan as the number one NBA player in his era, and he would like to explain why Michael Jordan is the number one NBA player in his era. So let me put him on. Hey, welcome to the program.
Hey, good to be there. Hey, nice being on here.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. Okay, so you have Michael Jordan as the number one NBA player in his era. Please feel free to explain if you like.
Yeah, but first off, I just wanted to say, I believe that you cannot label Michael Jordan as the greatest of all time because there were so many greats. So I just look at it as different eras. Like, for example, in the 70s, you had a great player there. You had great players there, and then you had a number one player from my perspective, and I wasn't around in the 70s. I do a little bit of research, the 80s as well, and then the 90s. And the 90s were pretty much Michael Jordan's era, or we can just say the Chicago Bulls era, because they pretty much dominated the 1990s.
So there's a lot to go over here, and I'm not going to bring up every point for practicality, and also so that you can have time to follow up, but I'll give you some points. 1, how do you know when an era starts and when an era finishes? 2, what about other NBA players who played in the same so-called era as Michael Jordan and also played in a different so-called era than Michael Jordan, or who also played in different so-called eras than Michael Jordan? 3, you also have a contradiction. On the one hand, you basically say that you shouldn't pick one NBA player as the number one NBA player of all time because of different reasons, but then you don't apply the same logic when it comes to picking one NBA player as the number one NBA player in his era. 4, lots of players dominated the 1990s. 5, lots of teams dominated the 1990s. And 6, if you say that the Chicago Bulls dominated the 1990s the most because they have 6 rings, or even if you don't say that, it doesn't matter anyway, because either way, you shouldn't go by teams to rank players.
I see, and I understand your point. But my point is, with Michael Jordan, he did so much in his era. He actually led his team to championships. I will say that. I can go on record of saying that just as in other eras, like in the 80s. I go back to the 80s. The 80s, you had the Los Angeles Lakers. They dominated the 80s. And you had players like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was probably on the tail end of his career. Actually, he did last until like the late 80s. But, 70s were best for him. But then you had Magic Johnson, who actually stepped in and took over that title, with what he can do and how he can actually, play all positions. At one point, I remember he actually played center to actually win a championship. So, as I'm saying, and then you go back to the 90s, and Michael Jordan, he didn't play all positions, but of course, he led his team. So for me, I just feel like he actually did the most in the 90s.
When you say he led his team to a championship, you're right. He led his team, but he was one of the leaders, and it's not like he's the only reason they won, or he's the main reason they won, which I know you're not saying, but when you say he led his team, it's just another way to act like they won because of him, because I can also say to you, when that same guy was on the Chicago Bulls, they lost, and they lost more times than they won. But you don't say Michael Jordan led his team to losses or blame him for the losses. And also when you say he accomplished the most, that's not true. A lot of players accomplished just as much as him or more than him. And to your other point, when you say about Magic Johnson took over and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I don't even know if Magic Johnson would agree with you on that. I think for a long time, they were acting like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the number one guy on that team. Now, eventually it became, I guess, you can say Magic Johnson's team, but again, I don't even know if Magic Johnson would agree with that. For a long time, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the main guy. He was always known as the Cap. He won Finals MVP and all that.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. Cap was Cap. He did do a good job back then. Magic Johnson helped to lead the team as well. Of course, it was Cap. I mean, I think he averaged about, let me just take a look if I have some stats here. Over his career, I think he averaged like 25 points a game and like 11 rebounds. So, yeah, I mean, if you look at Magic stats, I mean, he actually averaged 19, 7, and 11. And Kareem was like 59 or 55.9 field goal percentage. So it's a lot higher. So I can agree on that. Now, back to what I was saying about
Well, can
Jordan.
I ask you something? Ask you something.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. So another thing you have to understand why when you act like how do I put this? When you say about Michael Jordan leading his team to win, and you use that as part of your reason why you're elevating him over all the other guys, how can another guy lead their team to win if, for example, their team wasn't good enough to win?
How can he lead them to win if their team wasn't? Oh, that's true. Okay, and I understand that. Well, I think when the big moments counted, Jordan stepped up and took those moments. And he actually, in those moments, he actually elevated himself. So I have to stand on that and say that he did lead his team to actually win the championships, and to actually say that he was. I won't say that. Let me think. Actually, he was the best player on the team. I mean, that's just a fact.
It's not a fact. That's your belief. But let's say you're right. Let's say you're right.
Okay.
And we ignore everyone else's take, like Scottie Pippen may not agree with you. Phil Jackson may not agree, or maybe they do. It depends on the year. It doesn't matter, because let's say Michael Jordan was the number one guy on the team, and at the end of the day, you're taking an accomplishment of a team, and then you're isolating the individual, and you're ranking him over all the other individuals, again, based on a team accomplishment. Now, if you say he came through in the clutch parts and all that, that would be a different topic. That would be the topic of, is he the number one clutch player of his era? But even if you go to clutch, you're still going to run into problems like, how can another guy be a better clutch player than Michael Jordan if their team was not good enough to win the finals?
Well, there's so much to unpack there. Now, I'm thinking about what you're just saying. And, I have to go back to what I was actually going to say. Well, Mike, like I said, he did. He was clutch. I mean, let's just be honest. He was clutch.
A little overrated on that.
And hold on. Let me finish my point.
No, I'm just saying a little overrated on that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But here's the thing. If you look at stats, because I always do go to stats, Scottie Pippen, 18, no, not even that, 15 points a game. Michael Jordan, whatever it took to win the game. So sometimes he can average, his overall average is like 31 points.
Points is the only way to win?
Well, defense, of course. He was also all defensive team, which was Scottie Pippen.
Voting shouldn't be used to figure out who's the best defender. If I asked you right now, go vote for the best defender in the NBA, there's no way you would know that. It's just people voting. But if you're going to go by votes, I'm down with that. How then would you still measure which player is better? Because scoring and defense are not the only parts of the game. There's a lot more to the game. Scottie Pippen had less points, but he also sacrificed his game to help his team win. So what you're doing is you're putting Scottie Pippen in a lose-lose situation. If he has less points, you can say, look, he's not as good. If he scores more, you can say, look, he didn't sacrifice his game, and maybe they don't win.
The thing is, Scottie Pippen wasn't clutch. I don't even want to say that, because he was really good. And I kind of feel bad saying that, because who am I to say that about him? But, Michael Jordan was clutch. I'm just being honest with that. That's the way how I feel. Now, whether it's fact or opinion, when he was needed, he stepped up and he took advantage of that. Scottie Pippen didn't, like you said, he had to sacrifice certain things on the team. But Scottie Pippen wasn't that type of scorer, because now we're talking about both of them. He wasn't that type of scorer.
Well,
he just wasn't.
When Michael Jordan left, he showed he could score a lot.
So what was his average when Michael Jordan left?
I know it was in the 20s.
It was in the 20s.
Yeah.
Not even close to Mike's.
Okay. Well, Michael Jordan is like a 30 guy. It's not that big of a difference. But even if I'm wrong, even if you say, look, Michael Jordan is significantly a better scorer, you could be right on that. But that's not the only part of the game. And to your clutch example, if Michael Jordan is on a squad, that can back him up and guard someone else and be there for the rebound and give him the pass, all the things in a team game. I
Right.
don't think it makes any logical sense to avoid how they help him and just put the limelight on Michael Jordan. If Michael Jordan was on a bad team, it would be harder for him to be as good of a clutch player. And that's not a knock against him. That's just a
Right.
fact about any player. You do as well as you can, but it makes a difference what team you have. How can another player be a better clutch player than Michael Jordan if their team is not good enough to win?
How can it? Well, yeah, their team is not good enough to win. So, of course, that's just the way it goes. I mean, we have to, if you think about that the 90s Bulls team, they were pretty stacked. And I have to say that they were stacked.
Yeah.
I mean, just like how you have the teams what are stacked now.
Right.
But like I said, and I have to go back to that, and maybe I'm repeating myself over and over again.
You're fine.
But I just think, in my opinion, that Michael Jordan stepped up when it was necessary. Scottie Pippen, when he had a chance to prove himself, he couldn't win a championship.
Well, okay, now there's a lot to unpack there. First,
Okay.
it's not an opinion. Either he did or he didn't. And I think you're making the claim that he did, which is fine. So we'll go to my next point. He many times came through in the clutch, and he many times did not. And there's lots of other players who came through in the clutch and many times did not. And if you're going to say when Scottie Pippen had his chance, he didn't come through, you're going off of 1 year. But okay, I'm down with that. If you want to judge him by 1 year, Michael Jordan had multiple years where he lost with Scottie Pippen.
Oh, definitely.
And you can also say, well, look, when Scottie Pippen was alone, he didn't win. Well, guess what? The next year when they had Michael Jordan, they still lost.
They sure did. Now here we go, because here comes the tricky part.
You're gonna say he's rusty?
He was rusty.
Right, there you go.
Come on.
He was
See,
not.
I
He
noticed
was not. He was not rusty. He was not rusty.
Hey, he was rusty.
The number. If you talk about statistics, I would like for you to check his numbers. You want me to give them to you? I have them. I already memorized them.
Well, what are his numbers?
You want the playoffs? Because that's when he was rusty, right? Okay, 32 points a game, 48% field goal, 50% three-pointers. And the rest of his numbers were in line with his regular numbers.
Understood. Now, but he was just coming back. And as you saw with the terrible turnover, the terrible mistake that he made, which actually cost him the game. And I believe that was against the Orlando Magic.
So
I remember that game.
makes his entire game rusty?
Now, it doesn't make his entire game rusty, and I understand his numbers, okay, which were really good, but he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. But what happened?
Or he was ready, but his team got beat by a better team.
That's true. Now, what about the following year? What happened to that Orlando team?
What was supposed to happen?
They got swept.
Right, but it's not because of Michael Jordan. The teams were different. This is a very basic concept that a lot of Michael Jordan fans say they get.
Oh, yeah, he sure did. The team was different. I remember. Yeah.
In fact, the Orlando Magic had injuries to that team, and the Chicago Bulls had better players. For example, a Hall of Famer named Dennis Rodman.
Dennis Rodman.
Remember, this is not to knock Michael Jordan. This is to decide, is it one guy winning or losing? And then, if you want to go down that road and say it's because of Michael Jordan, you got to be consistent on both sides and say they lost while he was a leader. If you want to say he was rusty, okay, I'm down with that. You got to explain the statistics. You got to explain why in the regular season they never lost more than 2 games in a row. You got to explain why they won 6 games in a row twice. You got to explain why he had a 55-point game and other monster games. You got to explain why people were saying he's back. He's still the number 1 player in the NBA. He's still the number 1 NBA player of all time. Look, the guy didn't have that many games and he still dominates. He came back right out the gate and played right away. He played baseball and he does so good right away. He didn't play with his teammates that long and he does well and all that. You got to explain all that, but there is no explanation because at the end of the day, the real truth is his team got beat by a better team.
Okay, and I accept that. I mean, that's fact. I mean, his team got beat by a better team, and then that's right because Dennis Rodman did actually get on that team amongst other players. So when he was on there, that did make them a lot better. He was still the leader of the team. Right. I mean, and that may sound like nothing, but he was still the leader of the team. Still averaging his points, still elevating his team, still doing the best, just like his other players elevated the team. So, the thing is, I think that Michael Jordan is definitely the best player in his era. But teams, but it starts to sound more of it's a team effort, which it really is.
Right. And by the way, I don't blame Michael Jordan. I would never knock Michael Jordan for losing ever. I don't think he was rusty. There's no evidence. But even if he was, I don't think it takes that many games for a basketball player, a good basketball player,
Right.
a professional basketball player, and someone who's known as the number one NBA player of all time to need that many games to get back into things. And even if he does, let's say I'm wrong, and he needs that many games. How rusty do you have to be to make a pass or to get a rebound or to set a screen? So even if his shots were off, or even if his passes were off, he could still do other things to help his team. And if he was that rusty, then this questions him when it comes to his IQ and his personality. Why is he playing if he's that rusty? So in other words, you're actually putting him in a win-win situation. If he loses, you can say, well, hey, it ain't his fault. He's rusty. If he wins, you can say, look, the man was rusty and he won. You can't lose. It's a win-win.
A win-win. Well, yeah. Yeah, okay. It could be. I mean, I think it is. It definitely would be a win-win then. Yeah. If you look at it from that perspective, I understand that.
You know, if he would have won, you know what people would have been saying, right? He didn't play that many games. He had a baseball body. He was rusty and all that, and he still won. He's better than LeBron James. You know that.
Right. Oh, okay.
And by the way, if LeBron James did that, if LeBron James did that, if LeBron James came back with 17 games left in the season to have an easier time to win a ring, you know they would tear him down and say he's just trying to have an easier time to win a ring. And if he won a ring, they would not have counted it. And if he lost, they wouldn't have said he was rusty. You know these things.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I have nothing but respect for LeBron. I think he's the GOAT of his era. I mean, one of the greatest players of all time. I mean, he just broke Kareem's record. I mean, I have no ill will against LeBron. I think that he's really good. If you see, I mean, I love the Lakers. Of course, I'm a diehard Piston fan. Bad boys forever. But I love LeBron. I think that he's a great player. I think that he's the one from this era. So that's why I think that when we do talk about GOATs, it has to be from each era. Now, just a question for yourself.
Yeah, sure. Do you mind if I just follow up to that?
Sure thing.
Thank you. I disagree that it has to be players from an era for several reasons, which we can get into if you want, but I know you had a question, so go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I want to hear more.
Okay, yeah.
No, I really do. Go for it.
I appreciate that. So, for every point you give, I'm not going to go into detail for all the reasons why I find it questionable. I'm just going to give you a few points, and I've been doing that.
That's fine.
Yeah, I want to give
fine.
a few to give, for practicality, to give you time. Right, yeah. So to the era thing, I'm going to do the same thing. I'll give you a few points, again, for practicality and to give you time.
Okay.
How would so I'll give you four things. One, in no particular order. One, how would you define when an era starts and when an era ends? Two, whatever criteria you come up with, what about people who have a different criteria? Three, even if you have a criteria and it's legit, now you're going to run into a problem with players overlapping. So if Dr. J played until 1987 and Michael Jordan came in 1984 and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar came in 1969 and went to 1989 and so on, what era is a player from, And then even if you figured all this out, how would you be able to know who's the number one player in that era?
Well, I just think when it comes to eras, I think it goes off, and I do understand what you say. I'm talking about the most dominant time for these people. Like Jordan's era was the 90s. I think Kareem's was basically the 80s. Because we're not gonna count his his college years, but we're talking about NBA. I mean, if you think about 70s, there's a couple there. I got to say, Wilt Chamberlain, who averaged 22 rebounds a game. So I disagree with you on that. I think that you have to go by eras.
Okay, so if you say Michael Jordan's best time in his era was the 1990s, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's best time was the 1980s, I got to question you on these things because one, just by common sense, when you're younger, you're going to be better. And two, just check the numbers. They were better when they were younger. So in other words, if you want to go by eras and you want to find out when their best time was, by your logic, Michael Jordan's best time was the 1980s and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's best times was 1969 and 1970s. and maybe in the early 1980s.
I don't know about that,
The
and
numbers
that
show it.
isn't by my logic. The thing is, what I'm saying is when they actually really begin to win, like become at the top, the pinnacle of their game.
You're going back to rings?
Of course, rings have something to do with this. Of course.
It's a team game. One guy doesn't win and lose.
No, the team wins rings.
Right.
I never said, yeah, and you're right. You're right when you say that.
Right.
But he was the leader of the team. That's where we go back to leadership.
How can he win? How can he win in the 1980s if his team is not good enough to win? How can Kareem Abdul-Jabbar win if his team is not good enough to win?
How could Kareem Abdul-Jabbar win if his team isn't good enough to win? That's a very good question. It's a team thing. Okay, so then we go back to saying it's a team, but he was the best player on the team.
No, I got you on that. I'm not even debating you right now if he's the best player on his team. Depends on who you ask, but most people think it's Michael Jordan. That's fine. But I'm putting that to the side. Let's just accept he's the number one player on his team. I have no problem with you saying he was the best player on his team that won. That's fine. Now, why does he become better than other players if they're on a team that was not good enough to win, or if they had injuries or bad coaching or whatever? In other words, you're taking a team accomplishment, you're isolating the individual, and then ranking him over all the other individuals. Their age, when they were younger, just common sense, they're better, and the numbers show they were better when they were younger.
But when they were younger, how many championships did they win?
How many were they supposed to win?
It's not about a number of championships that they won. That's at the end of everything that's said. Okay. It's not about a number. Do you understand where I'm going with that?
Then I'll change my question. No, I knew what you meant, but I just put it out there just to make you think about it and to make a point. But I'll switch it up. You say, how many championships did they win? I ask you, how can they win a championship?
How can they win a championship? Of course, with teams, with the team. Of course, they can win with the team. But okay, now I understand what you just said. But then that goes right back around into the circle of where I say, okay, he was the best player on the team. Simple and plain. This person was the best player on the team.
No, that's right. So that's right. You're going in a circle, but I'm not understanding how do you. I know what you're saying. You're saying, okay, I get your point. It's a team game. You need a good team to win. We go back in the circle and all that, but you're not explaining why you're putting it on a guy for winning and elevating him over other guys for not winning.
Okay, the way how I see it is, you got to go back to stats. You have to go back to stats again. How many points he averaged, how he played, rebounds. I mean, everything that actually means something as far as like in a basketball game. And how well he did it, how well he messed with his teams, how well he messed with his team. Excuse me.
You're fine.
The same thing that can be said about Michael Jordan as well. How well he messed with his teams, how many points he scored, how many rebounds. All that makes you know what I mean.
Yeah, I got you. So if you're going to make the point, look, he was never 100% better when he was younger, or when they were younger. And even when they had better statistics, I'm with you, because you can always gain things. You get experience, knowledge, you figure the ins and outs and all that. I have no problem with those things. The problem is when it comes to the overall game, as you said, points, rebounds, and I'll throw in things, field goal percentage, all these things. Again, when you are younger, you can do more, jump higher, be faster, have more stamina, all that. But that doesn't make you better. I'm sure you can find examples of players who were younger and not as good, like you said, Michael Jordan, supposedly. But then you go to statistics. Now, you brought up statistics at least a couple of times, and I tell you again, the numbers show that when Michael Jordan was younger and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was younger, when I say younger, I'm referring to, because you said 90s, so I'm going to say 80s. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in 1969, the 1970s, and maybe the early 1980s, they had better numbers. The stats show it.
Right. That's true. That is true. And like you said, you get better with you learn more when you get older.
I don't think it takes 7 years for him to learn either, by the way.
Who was that?
I don't like Michael Jordan or anyone. I don't think it takes 7 years, because Michael Jordan came in 1984 and he won in 1991.
Right. That's right.
I don't think it took him 7 years to learn that much. But I would grant you, the more time that goes by, he's going to get more experience and more knowledge. But how much time does a good basketball player need to figure things out?
Oh, come on now. Now let's go there. Okay. Now I know exactly where you went. Now come on. He had to fight against it. There were wars out there. Even I think we talked about that earlier. when I actually joined your live. And I think I talked about that. The Pistons, he had to get through them. He had to get through the Celtics, the Lakers. These are the points that make him a lot better.
No,
and being able to
his team did. Him and his team. Magic Johnson.
Of course, him and his.
You brought up Magic Johnson. No, you're fine. You brought up Magic Johnson. You said it yourself. He played different positions. That was his first year. In his first year, he did all this. I could show you tons of players who won and dominated early. You don't need that much time to win. Now, if your point is, look, some players, you need time to get experience, get knowledge, figure things out, and all that. I'm with you. I have no dispute that. But the problem is, if you're going to go by what you said, the overall game, the statistics, being at the right place. I'm not quoting your exact words, but you're basically saying all these things players do, accomplish all that. When it comes to just the overall game, there were parts where he maybe got better at as time passed, but his overall game, he was just as good or better when he was younger.
Yeah, just as good or better. But he didn't win any championships.
How can he? He didn't have a good enough team to win. I'm defending Michael Jordan here.
I know. I understand that. And what I'm saying is, it is what it is. He did not have a good enough team, and we all know that. As you see, it was Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. And, they had to get by some of the toughest, some of the grittiest teams. And when I say gritty, I'm talking about those Detroit Pistons.
I've seen people over-exaggerate how tough those times were. There's plenty of people in those days who used to question the NBA.
So are you saying that the Pistons aren't tough? That's what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. But but when you say he had to get past these teams, every player has to get past lots of tough teams in the history.
That's the way how it works, which then after he accomplished that and he became more clutch, then he actually won championships with his team, but he was still the greatest player on his team.
Even if I accept that he became more clutch around 1991, which I don't accept. There's no way to prove that. But let's say you're right, just to help you out. Let's say he became more clutch. That's not the only part of the game, which I know you know that, but the point is the overall game, the things that you were saying earlier about what players have to do. I'm going by your logic here, the overall game. Even if you didn't say that, I would tell you the overall game. The point is, he was just as good or better, which you agreed, and he needed a team to win, which you agree. It seems like you agree on a lot, but then you jump ship and you go to, well, it is what it is. He was a leader on a team that won a ring.
So he wasn't the leader on the team that won the ring?
He was.
I have to go there because that's what it sounds like. I don't know now. I'm trying to figure this out. Maybe I'm wrong.
As I said to you, even if we just accept he was the best player, period, okay, because he scored more points and that just makes him the best player, fine. I'll accept that if you want. But you can't then say he's better than everyone else. It's a team thing. Think of it like this, man. If you were playing basketball and you were the best player in the league, hands down, there was no dispute. You got the points, the rebounds, the steals. You did everything and then some. And now you played another team, and they had a star who was pretty good. He wasn't as good as you now, okay? But he was not better than you, but he was pretty good. If his team beats your team, that doesn't mean he's better than you.
Oh, of course. Yes, I agree with that.
Okay, so apply the same logic to Michael Jordan. If his team wins a ring, it doesn't mean that he's better than everyone else.
He's definitely the best player on his team.
Okay, that's a different topic then, right? I can accept that if you want. I don't think it's fair to pick one guy as the best player sometimes.
Okay.
But I can accept that. Now the question becomes, how does that same guy who's the best player on his team, how does that make him the best player over all the other guys who played in the NBA?
This is exactly why I say eras. 90s. What makes him the best over everybody else in all the league? Do you know of anybody that's better than him during that time?
Sure, definitely.
Please name me a couple.
I can, but what's going to happen now, as soon as I start listing players, you're going to understandably dispute that. And then we're going to get into a new topic about this guy versus that guy, and we can do that.
No, I don't want to. I won't get into it with you, but I want to hear your opinion because I'm telling you how I feel. So I would love to hear it.
And I'll happily give it to you, but you don't have to do this if you don't want to. I'm just throwing it out there. If you don't want to, I'll go to your question. I would still like to know how Michael Jordan winning rings or winning a ring makes him better than everyone else then.
Best player on the team, the leader of the team. That's how. I just answered your question.
No, you said,
I said it like 15 times.
You did,
right?
but
I'm excuse me, not 15 times, but I said it a few times. I'm not trying to be condescending.
No problem. You definitely said it a lot, and I followed up every time. And and you agreed with me that it's a team game, and if a guy on another team beat you, and you're on that team, it doesn't make him better than you. You agreed with these things.
I sure do.
So even though you're repeating yourself, it doesn't mean anything if you're not showing me how it means you're right.
How? So I need to show you how I mean it's right. So
it'd be nice.
Stats. I mean, then we go back to stats. It's like I'm going to be saying the same thing. It's no way how I can actually show you this.
Okay, so all
I can do is just give you the stats and the statistics.
No, you didn't. You didn't do that. But are you saying now that he had the best statistics in his era?
He had. Yes, he did. Yes, in his era.
That's not true.
Okay, well, like I said, now that's where I asked you a question. I said, okay, so who was better than Michael Jordan?
Okay, but
in his era?
But that's fine. But you realize now you had a new thing. Now you said he had the best stats. I'd like to know. You don't have to do this, but it'd be nice if you prove that.
Okay. He averaged 30 points. Let me look at Michael Jordan's stats. I do have them here.
All right.
Over his career, he averaged 30 points.
Well, no, you're talking about the 90s, remember?
Oh, in the 90s. Okay, let me go to the 90s with Michael Jordan. Just give me a second.
I don't mind if you want to do his whole career, but I'm just going by what you said, the 90s.
Okay.
Which, by the way, once you get the 90s, you're still going to have to explain what happened to the 80s. You know what I mean?
Give me 1 second.
Sure.
All right. Okay. So let me go to his 90 stats.
So you're not going to include the 80s and you're not going to include the 2000s, just the 90s?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the 90s because, like I said, I go in eras. That's just the way I feel. I know you don't feel that way, but that's how I feel.
How do you decide when an era starts and finishes? Why is the 80s not part of his era and the 2000s not part of his era?
Like I said before, the reason why is because that's when he was at his best.
How so?
Oh, I know. Here we go. It's going to go back to no, he wasn't, because when he was younger, I know where we're going.
That's why it goes in. So even though I get your side of it, that you're repeating yourself, you're definitely repeating yourself. I acknowledge that, but remember, you're repeating yourself because you're telling me things that you believe to be true, but you're not proving it. So I'm just following up to your point. So if you say he was the best in the 90s, I don't understand how you know that. There's no proof of that. He was actually better in the 80s.
Well, I'm looking at his 80 stats and I'm looking at his 90 stats. I mean, at 1 year, I believe it was 86, 87 was, and 87 and 88 was when he was really at his peak of scoring. Like 37.1 point per game. And then in the 90s, he was just consistently at 30s.
Points is not the only part, by the way.
Right, of course. Yeah. Rebounds per game. I mean, they average out to be the same. Assists per game, the same. Steals per game. He actually went up when he was in his 94, 95 season. 92, he was really high. 2.8, that's pretty good.
In other words, his numbers are either, like I said earlier, remember I was saying to you, he was just as good in the 80s or better. So in other words, a lot of his numbers are in the same range, but when they do get better, it's not 100%, but when they do get better, usually it's in the 80s.
Okay, yeah, I see. Right. I see, because I'm looking at his stats.
Right. In other words, I don't think you have to be I don't think you have to wait till you're 27 years old to be a better player. When you're under 27, more likely you're going to be better. It's not like puberty starts at 27. So when I don't do this thing where I say, okay, my era is the 80s and 90s and we're going to divide them. To me, it just goes 1 year at a time. But if you're going to separate them like that, and you're going to say 90s is one era, 80s is another, and he was better than the 90s, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you are acknowledging that he had either the same numbers or better numbers in the 80s?
Yeah, he had some really good numbers in the 80s.
Okay.
And in the 90s, from 91 to 98, I believe it is, is when he actually won his championships. Of course, he lost once in between there, but that's where I see. I mean, in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. But in my opinion,
that's a Frank Sinatra song.
All right, okay.
Or at least Frank Sinatra. At least Frank Sinatra. I don't know if he made it, but at least he sung it.
I know it. Okay, no problem.
I'm just joking around, man. Go ahead.
No worries. But as I look, I mean, this is where he actually won.
Well, he didn't win. He was on a team that won.
Yeah, his team won the rings, but he was the clutch player, the best player on the team.
On a team that won.
Yeah, on a team that won. Okay.
Right. So in other words, here's a question for you. Mm-hmm. If you acknowledge that his numbers were either the same or better in the 80s, he's basically the same guy overall. Remember, I'm not saying it's 100% now, but he's basically the same guy. So if you say to me, look, he's the best player on the team in the 90s and he won, but if he's just as good or better in the 80s, then what's the difference?
Bad teams. You're right.
Exactly.
Bad team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you get it. I know you get it. So then why go, as you said, why repeat yourself and go in a circle and go back to rings and all that?
Exactly. I mean, because that is my stance on this. That's my stance. You understand?
But why?
Why is it my stance? Yeah. Because that's what I judge it off of.
But why?
Rings.
But why?
Why do I judge it off of rings?
Yeah.
Because okay, I'm going to go back in the circle. It's because to me, it's just, we're going to keep on going in the circle. I mean, because that's just how I see it. Okay. I see that he got, when he actually won his championships is when of course he's on a great team.
Right.
I will acknowledge that.
Right.
I'm not one of those crazy diehard fans who won't acknowledge things, but I will say that. I mean, once he got on the team, when he got strong enough or had a good enough team, they actually won championships. Now, he was the best player on that team.
Okay, so to stop it from going in a circle, I'll ask you one more question on this. Okay. And then after that, if you still want to do this, that's fine. Now, why not, instead of just saying, this is my stance and I'm going to do this, why not switch it up and acknowledge that since it is a team game, and it's not about a guy winning and losing and all that you shouldn't use rings to elevate him, especially when you also said right now, I don't have your exact words, don't quote me, but you said something like, I'm not one of those fans who won't acknowledge things. Why not stop being like those fans and just acknowledge things?
Oh, man. Okay, I can acknowledge that Jordan.
Rings should never be used to rank players. Jerry West said something like, if you're going to rank players, the craziest thing you can do is use rings. Michael Jordan said, basically, you shouldn't use rings to rank guys.
Michael Jordan always also said that you shouldn't call him the GOAT, and he leaves it up to others to make that distinction. Yeah. But I'm just saying, there are others out here who say, no, I'm the GOAT. I'm the best, ever.
Right. A lot of players,
yeah, I mean, but is that even necessary? We all have our opinions about things. That's just the way it goes. Now, back to my question.
Well, just real quick, it's not an opinion, just so you know. It's a claim. When they say he is the number one guy of his era, like you're saying,
right.
That's not an opinion, that's a claim. It's like if someone said to you, in my opinion, you're on Venus, that wouldn't make sense. It's not an opinion.
Doesn't make sense.
If you say,
you're absolutely right.
I'm claiming to be on Venus. I'm on Venus. You're making a claim then. And when you make a claim, it'd be nice if you proved it. But there is no proof because he's not the number one guy in his era, and rings shouldn't be used.
Okay, so then back to my question.
All right.
Now, answer my question for me. Okay,
sure,
so let me know. Do you know, the same question what I asked you before.
All right.
Who was better than Michael Jordan in the 90s?
Okay, I'll give you, here's an example.
Okay.
Karl Malone.
Yeah, he was really good. I will say that. Malone, wow.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And I don't know how many examples you want, so I gave you one. So
that's good. And you know what? Karl Malone was, man, Jesus. I mean, unstoppable.
Right.
I mean, he was really unstoppable. Him and John Stockton. I mean, it was Stockton to Malone.
Right.
It was great. I will say that.
Yeah, it was.
I don't have his stats in front of me, but
they're monster.
I'm pretty sure
monster
they
stats.
are.
Monster stats. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, I didn't even think of him. But yeah, I mean, I will say that, yeah, I have to be honest there. I mean, yeah, he had amazing stats. I just remember his game. He was just that guy. I mean, he could get to the rack anytime he wanted. Nobody could stop him. And it was like it was like looking at a LeBron James. I'm just saying, in that era, people were scared to stand out in front of him. So yeah, I agree. He's a really good player. Really good.
Well, so do you actually agree that he was better in the 90s than Michael Jordan?
Better than Michael Jordan in the 90s?
You were saying you agree. So
I'm going to have to really look into that. I think he's in there. I mean, he's definitely in there. Okay. He's definitely one of the top. I can't really, because I don't, if I can pull up his stats. Let me just look those up.
Let me ask you, by the way, I'm just wondering, I think I know the answer, but I don't want to assume. It's okay that you don't know his stats and all that, but if you don't know his stats that well, wouldn't you have to know that to determine if Michael Jordan is the number one player in his era? I assume there's what you said about Karl Malone. I'm guessing there's other players you maybe don't know their stats as well either. So if that's true, wouldn't you have to know these things before you rank Michael Jordan as the number one player in his era?
Well, here's the thing. You brought up someone else, which was really good. I mean, look, I'm a guy off the internet. I mean, off of YouTube. I don't really, I do study the game. I do love the game, but I really don't. I'm not really too much of a trying to figure out every single person's stats. And I am looking at Karl Malone's stats, but they're actually not as good as Jordan's.
Oh, they're better.
Just to be honest with you.
Better,
but I'm actually looking at them right now.
And I'll tell you what you're doing wrong. I already know what you're going to do. You're going by certain stats. That's why you think Michael Jordan's better. If you go by everything, the minutes played, the games played, the points, rebounds, field goal percentage, all that stuff, he's very clearly a better player. If nothing else, just his height, weight, and length makes him more of a threat. Yeah,
I'm actually looking at his field goal percentage. It is very high.
Yeah.
Well,
when I go by stats, man, just like anyone in any sport, whenever they draft a player or they sign a player or trade for a player or whatever, they don't cherry pick what things they want to go by usually. They go by the entire game, and usually whoever brings more to the table is considered the better player.
Those are those are amazing. His field goal percentage was, wow, I'm just looking at it.
Right.
You got a point there. I mean,
I'm actually surprised. A part of me is surprised that his name doesn't get brought up more about, these kind of topics. But then a part of me is not surprised because there's lots of guys whose names don't get brought up more for these kind of topics.
Wow. Yeah, he was super.
Right, he was his third all-time leading scorer of all time. If you want to go back.
Yeah, he is right. Yeah, he is.
Yeah, I almost said second, but then recently LeBron James became first.
Yeah, he took over that. Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah.
Or even before he became first, LeBron James was second for a while, obviously. So.
Oh my gosh! I mean, I didn't notice that his field goal percentage was that high though. Gosh,
that's high. Yeah, he was a great player.
Yeah, he attacked the basket like nobody else. I mean,
and he shot mid-range jumpers pretty well.
Oh, he sure did have a great mid-range. I will say that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, hey. I can be wrong. You know what I mean? I mean, I can admit when I'm wrong. No problem.
Well, that definitely shows you're not one of those type of fans that you were bringing up earlier.
Damn, I'm just looking like, Jesus Christ. Because I never really looked at his stats.
Sure. And
then when you do look at him, you're like, oh my God, this is insane.
Right, yeah. No, I think he's underrated.
Jesus. Wait till I show my brother this. I think you won't. That's really going to get him. Do you have anybody else that you think?
Sure. I do have some names. I don't think you're going to agree with me on every guy, though, but I'll give you as many names as there are.
Jesus.
Here's another guy. How about his guy, John Stockton?
Oh, yeah. John was something else.
The all-time leader in steals and assists.
That's correct. And in points too, right?
Pencil him in for 82 games a year. He plays the minutes. Right. He can shoot anywhere on the floor. He passes like crazy. When Michael Jordan has the ball, he's a threat to score. When John Stockton has the ball, he's a threat to score, and everyone else around him is a threat to score.
Jesus. Yeah, I'm looking at his stats as a matter of fact now. Oh, goodness.
Yeah, look at those steals, those assists, the field goal percentage, all that.
Yeah, he's pretty good. Yeah,
he's pretty
really good.
Yeah.
But like I will say that I do go off of errors. I've always done that, and that's what I do look at. But if I'm looking at these stats, I'm like, man, this is amazing. John Stockton, oh gosh.
Right.
Yeah, there's quite a few. Yeah, there's quite a few. Yeah.
In your defense, there are other people out there who are educated NBA fans who will say, look, there's no such thing as a number one NBA player of all time, but if you're going to rank players, you might want to go by eras. So there are people who do that, who are educated NBA fans. I don't do that for multiple reasons, but at least you're being a little bit more reasonable compared to some other Michael Jordan fans who determined he is the number one NBA player of all time.
No, I'm not a diehard. Like I said, I'm a Detroit Pistons for life. I'm from Detroit, so of course, I'm a Pistons fan. Bad Boys. Just bringing that up, Isaiah Thomas and the Bad Boys, and like I said, that was one team that MJ him and his team had to battle to get by. They got better, they got a better team, and then they elevated from there. Yeah, okay, hey, I can be wrong,
Okay.
I am that guy.
Fair enough.
Okay. All right. Well, where do we go from here?
It's your call, man. Do you still want to make the case that Michael Jordan is the number one NBA player in his era, or are you reconsidering?
I got to do more research. That's all I can say. I can already see a couple who actually have better stats, better numbers than him.
And remember, we're going by averages. We haven't even gone over totals. Totals matter too. I mean, for the most part, we haven't gone over totals. So yeah, just like in any sport, man. Whenever you have a player, you want to go by everything: height, weight, length, and a bunch of other things. And whoever brings more to the table is the better player. That's true, and I do agree with that. However, sometimes you do have the little guys who step their game up, and you know of quite a few who step their game up. You're right.
And I mean, sometimes you just have those players. I mean, when you think about Stockton, I mean, you think about Isaiah Thomas. I mean, there's so many. Right. Joe Dumars. Right. So many super guards. So many players who actually elevated their game. Of course, they couldn't compete in other areas when it comes to like rebounds per games. Mm-hmm. But they can compete in shooting threes, making the right passes, getting to the rack. Mm-hmm. So let me just say this. It's always good to hear a little bit hear from other people, and then it can actually open up your eyes, and then you can see a little bit further past what you already have thought. So
thank you.
Yeah, I mean that's really good. So I got to go home and do my research a little. Well, I got to go and do my own research a little bit further, so I can actually be right.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, anything else you want to go over, or?
Well, pretty much, man. That's about it, man. I like that because I didn't know that you would actually have some good stats, or could actually bring up other players who had stats that were a lot higher than MJ's.
Oh, okay. No, I appreciate you being very nice.
I'm just being honest. I mean, like I said, it's not about it's not really about fighting over this. I don't have time to do that. If I hear something that I know I know it's true, why would I still lie about that? That doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Right? Doesn't make sense at all. That's just the way I see it. So yeah.
No, sure, I respect
other than that, I mean, hey, that's that.
Hey, please subscribe. And if you disagree with me on something, you can go on my program and show me your facts on whatever you disagree on. If you want to go on, let's set it up. Send me an email. The email is right there in the description section. Thank you.